We're live. I'm back in Novi, Michigan for the last day of the International Battery Show, Expo, and conference. It's not so packed today. Um, Yesterday there was like a half a mile backup in cars outside of the lot, overflow in the parking. I had to wait, Tuesday, the first day, I had to wait outside like 40 minutes. I screamed kind of a ramble of waiting in line. I pre-registered, but to get my pass. So today there'll probably be no line. I have my pass, I'll be able to go right in. And I wasn't able to get good internet reception inside the conference. They had Wi-Fi of the conference center. Also, that I switched from my 4G. Maybe I'm not sure if I had the new iPhone. Arbane, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I'm not sure if I had the new iPhone 14, if it would have made a difference. It just might have been maxed out the internet from the huge attendance. So hopefully I'll be able to get reception inside. I'll be able to do a complete walkthrough of the floor. The conference was actually sold out. So, there's a lot of interest in batteries and the technology. President Biden was in Detroit at the auto show. Really should have came here. This is probably more important, even for the funding, but the auto show is more interesting and historic event. So you enter the hotel area here, the beautiful convention center, walk over to the entrance. So batteries are up from technology, all sorts of uses and funding. So Biden was here yesterday, the Inflation Reduction Act that is giving all sorts of funding for electric vehicles, batteries, solar power, wind power. Usually uses battery storage. A lot of the wind turbines also have battery storage. So there's a direction of green energy, government funding, change in the direction of technology. A whole bunch of reasons why the show was packed. But as you can see, the first day that it's not so packed today. So hopefully I keep reception and thank you. Okay, so hopefully this is the overflow room. They have the conference upstairs. So hopefully I keep reception. And I was trying to ramble yesterday. I didn't prepare for the conference, so my memory wasn't fresh in all of the technologies. I hadn't looked at like who's going to be here or the latest developments, but I read through the brochure. I took quite a few pamphlets. I read through a bunch of the pamphlets. Stephen? No, I doubt Tesla's here. I'm not sure who makes Tesla's batteries, but I mean, it's the battery show. So there's a lot of people who make components for Tesla, but almost none of the auto dealers are here. Ford, General Motors, because it's the supply chain, and batteries are lower down in the supply chain. Anyone familiar with the automotive, and they said manufacturers like automotive or bust, because 50% of global manufacturers related to the automobile. But the supply chain used to have called tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers in terms of the part, and the batteries could even be tier 2. That the typical lead acid battery or whatever goes into the vehicle isn't directly related. Almost none of the major companies make the batteries themselves, and they just purchase the batteries from international suppliers, and then, as I mentioned, all the auxiliary companies related to battery manufacturers. So there's over 750 vendors here, and I don't think any of the major auto dealers are here. And even a lot of the major auto suppliers are not here because batteries could be like tier 2. And so it's just the nature, and as mentioned, like the Far East, the vast majority of batteries are made in the Far East, possibly due to the current diplomatic situation and COVID travel restrictions in China. There's not that many Chinese companies, a lot of Korean companies, and a lot of the Korean companies have Chinese counterparts. But usually this show would be probably like 10-20% Chinese. And so that's been different over the last few years. Typically, this show would be flooded with Chinese people, and literally Chinese people that come from China for the conference and advertising the batteries. So you don't actually see many batteries on display. So if you look from previous years, you could see a lot of the Chinese vendors, and they have just large batteries on supply, and almost none of them are here today. So that was like the overflow area of the conference, going through the corridor into the main area. So I'm hoping I keep good reception. So yeah, it's a huge difference not having the Chinese here. So here, like American Battery Solutions, these look like classical lead acid batteries. Most automobiles still use lead acid. More powerful batteries are lithium, but lead acid is much cheaper. Lead acid is still the standard for automobile batteries. And there are also environmental concerns with the recycling. Lead acid batteries could be recycled and somewhat safely discarded without environmental damage, but a lead acid battery that is not safely discarded could lead to a lot of environmental damage, and they need to be replaced quicker and everything. So lithium's the future. However, the phasing out of lead acid batteries may not even happen, and or will take decades. So, as I said, every element of the battery business is here, from the materials necessary for the battery, testing equipment, computer simulation software, manufacturing. So you have a lot of like people call it the Silicon Conference of separators. So like if you got lead acid battery, if you had lithium, and lithium's the most common. So there's actually the material suppliers who will supply the elements, nickel, cadmium, mostly lithium, in wholesale. So if you wanted to make batteries and you just wanted to buy a whole bunch of lithium, there's lithium at different grades like gasoline, where you could get refined lithium, or you could get lithium at various points in the refining process to where they're ready to actually go into a car battery or any battery. And so you have the suppliers, you have the refiners, you have the equipment. So here you'll show like pellet form of polyethylene, various forms. So lithium usually will come in these pellets or powder, and if it's already refined, and then you have these large separators that will shake, or various chemical processes to refine the lithium, and then once the lithium's refined, to put it into the structure that it's going to go into the battery. And there's many types of battery structures. There's solid state. Usually they have a film. So the lithium ion allows the free flow of electrons, and the free flow of electrons is what allows the battery to give power. And it's usually at a certain width or density of lithium, so they'll have a film that separates the free seminar. So they have the paid conference, and this is the free part of the crew of the floor, and it's huge. Probably be like a 5-mile walk to walk through every aisle here. With probably like 5 miles of walking. For the reception, if it's a dead spot or if it's just maximized use, people using, or various. So as I said, like if I were to do a complete walkthrough, it'd probably be like 5 miles of walking because they have the whole space. Even the usual food tents have been put outside in tents to maximize space for the conference. And the conference is upstairs. You see up there, second floor. Second floor has conference centers. Right there in the balcony over there is yes, I'll talk about the charging stations and President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. One of the main things that they're funding is the infrastructure for charging cars. So, I would just briefly mention what I always mention about the nature of capitalism and economics, that the majority of the people here, they got to make a living, they got to feed their family, they want to make sales. So you have younger people that get paid, young introductory people, where the companies invest into them in order to learn and come to the conference and meet contacts. But mostly they're here to make sales and international networking, and it's business. So they're usually, the engineers, a lot of them friendly. So most of the tables are staffed and manned by multiple people that will include a technical staff and the sales staff. And this one, a lot of this conference, you probably have actually senior management, where the majority of the senior management, or part of the senior management, the bigger companies will have like tens of vice presidents, but chief technology officers, sometimes even the CEO, and you will come to these events. So if you go to a booth, you could hit just the sales staff that doesn't know too much. They might have the engineer, and if you're a big buyer, they might even be able to speak to the head of company, because it's here in Metro Detroit, and some of there might be $100 million deals being closed. I'm not sure that big, but certainly many $1 million deals are being closed here. Some people are buying tens of millions of dollars worth of batteries, and if a vendor finds the right supplier in the Far East and makes a dedicated contract to vend off their battery, so there's big business going on here. And probably why so many people are here is looking for business leads, trying to get ahead. And they know that this is a up and coming important field. So if you're talking like battery charging stations, so if you wanted to be a vendor of battery chargers, and you're big, you might use multiple ones. But if you're let's say you're going to install a few thousand a year, and so you're looking for a vendor, and you might pay a few hundred to a few $1,000s for the charger, depending on the charger, and a bigger client might buy tens of thousands of them, and that's just here in one area, let alone an international deal that would be brokered. So I was mentioning President Biden, was here in Detroit at the auto show, and he's talking about investment in charging stations. So here you can see Pro EV, high voltage cable. So it's all the aspects of the battery. If you're companies that have chargers, to the simple elements of electrical distribution, testing, So you can get complete chargers, or you could get the parts for the chargers. So if you're a company, so here you see some fuel cells. So if you're a company that makes charging stations, you could come here to the conference and purchase, you'll find the vendors that make components for the charging stations. And usually you might have a dedicated supplier, but usually you're familiar with all the suppliers and constantly checking the prices. So I mentioned here's like the mixers for generally lithium. But if you're seriously in the business, price is a big deal, and you need to really know all the major suppliers and the competitive prices that that you would probably switch suppliers if there was a better supplier. That it's the nature of business that whoever gives you the best product at the best deal, you're generally going to do business with. So that's why all the major companies usually send their staff to all of these conferences. So saying that there'll be a few people from the staff, and this one's so major that it even has a large element of the senior management of the companies that will come to it. So as I mentioned, the charging stations, the infrastructure that President Biden focused on, so there's a few things in the Inflation Reduction Act. So here you see the size of, like the lithium batteries would be for an automobile. Generally, this would go. These probably aren't even car batteries. They're truck batteries. There's house batteries, solar energy. But I said the majority of the business here is focused on automobile, but there is also solar technology related batteries. So the Biden Inflation Reduction Act has rebates for electric vehicles of a few thousand, like $2,000 to $5,000, up to $80,000 cars. And I was reading in Charge magazine that generally if you're willing to spend $80,000 on a car, the rebate's not going to make that big of a deal. But like a Tesla, still electric vehicles cost $40,000 to $50,000. So a $2,000 to $3,000 rebate from the government has decent incentivation for people to buy it. So that's one of the things in the Inflation Reduction Package. And then also is infrastructure, which would be mostly charging. So I'm actually on a phone call, a conference later, 1 o'clock today, with ITC Holdings that runs the electric for Detroit Edison and actually multiple states. So the local power company only owns the lines, but the distribution and they might even own some of the power stations, but the distribution lines that go across the states is outsourced to a different company called ITC Holdings. But you're just mentioning that the electricity distribution is also important because electric cars no longer using gas requires not just the charging stations, but the changing in the energy consumption and distribution across the country. So that's an important part of policy. So you even see it's Mitsubishi here. It's not Mitsubishi, the car company, it's their chemical group. They said almost none of the car companies are here. It'd be a waste of their money. People aren't here to buy cars. They're here to deal batteries. And it could be that the car companies, some of like the CEOs, so some of the speakers in the conference are representative of the car companies, but there's nothing really for the car companies to show that they might be buyers, and they're buyers, not vendors, and they don't need a booth to be a buyer. People are here to sell things, not to buy things. Some people are buying things also, but so like Mitsubishi, you see is here. That's a different arm of their company. So there are a lot of companies here that have testing and analytics. So like electrical distribution, batteries, like automotive testing expo. You have to test a certain amount of every. They got us, Zeiss analytics, Zeiss 3D scanning. Been to their hit all these companies, scanners. So here's a whole bunch of 3D chargers. Here's a good display. You're still there, Steve. Maybe you'll see here, and you can see the various companies. Bosch is one of the biggest auto suppliers in the world. Bosch makes basically every single component of cars, but doesn't actually make cars. And here's some smaller companies, and various fast charge, regular charge. Fihong, probably Korean. I said like almost no Chinese companies here. So they probably have Chinese counterparts, but Korean. So here you can see Shell. It may be made by Fihong, but specific for Shell. That package, when they package here for America, they put most modern chargers here. I'll come back and try to look at their book here. Check their book. I'm going to come back and collect reading materials and sort of grab this one. So it's pretty interesting. Fihong here, charging stations. They look like pretty high quality, top of the line, new charging. Just shown here on the far end that the conference and keynote sessions are upstairs here. So that you have to pay for separately. They cost like a few $100s for the pass. So there I just walked through probably like a mile. Like I've already walked a mile. Just walked 2 complete traverses of the whole floor. These were the bigger companies. You can get the smallest size, or you could get a whole display that might have like eight sizes. So those were the bigger companies with the bigger displays. These look like electrical components, switchers. So you mentioned like Tesla or something like this. So here's a company that just focuses on the plugs. Other companies like the PLC circuits, electrical distribution equipment, wires, testing equipment, switches, power cable. So there's over 750 vendors. There'll be some generic automotive related things. Here's for fuel cell, which might be like high pressure gas or oxygen. I think this is the fuel cell part. So the fuel cell, if it's like hydrogen or something, so you might have hydrocells or gas distribution equipment, monitoring, testing. There's always the electrical components and the computer control software, controlling and monitoring software. So all these conferences have those various elements of the computer control software, the automation companies that will try to automate the process, torque wrenches, power tools, different analyzing, testing devices that are specific to the various devices that might be used in the car that that a technician would use to measure the specific thing in the car. They have a lot of freebie stuff. A lot of companies give away freebies. A lot of times like pens, USB power drives, widgets, cups, and various things. Usually I just take the reading material. But here you got engineers toolkits. They may be giving those away. Um, but there's so much stuff to get that I'll just take the reading material because if I take all the freebies, my car is parked also like half a mile away because it's still pretty crowded. That it's tough to carry all this stuff. So as long as I get good reception, just keep on walking through aisle by aisle, and then I'm gonna tip it back and gather reading material. So this is the electric and hybrid part. Over there is the battery show. So this is less focused on batteries, more focused on automobiles and engines.
Don't have one like that.
And I saw this yesterday. Cool car.
Race car in here.
Yeah, batteries are pretty expensive. And so a lot of these companies that make car batteries make all sorts of batteries. And like you don't have Duracell here. I don't know, like Energizer, Duracell, the companies that make your regular AA type batteries that you see in stores. I've never seen any of them, these companies. But and they might also even be made in the Far East under different companies, and they just print those Duracell Energizer name on them. But batteries are pretty expensive, and but the companies usually make all sorts of batteries. So the batteries for a car a lot of times cost $10,000-$20,000. The reason why an electric car costs $40,000-$50,000 is because the battery costs like $10,000-$20,000 itself. It's the most expensive component in an electric car. There's all sorts of batteries. So as opposed to a lead acid battery, it was mentioned yesterday in my ramble when I was waiting outside. Lead acid battery only costs like $100, and but it can't power a car. A lead acid battery really doesn't supply that much power in a car, only enough to start the engine. But the lead acid battery wouldn't actually be able to power the car, just enough to put the starter on for the electric motor to start. And so the amount of power required in these lithium batteries is not comparable to your $100 lead acid car battery that doesn't actually power the car. A lot of cooling equipment. Let's see, there's energy solutions. Here's more charging stations, Rhombus energy solutions, different form of charger. They only have one on display. I would assume almost all the major companies that make charging stations are here. And I noticed some of the AI equipment. SFA, the biggest conglomerate in South Korea. They say they have over $1 trillion a year in sales. Partial government company in South Korea that Tesla might have some proprietary patents, and they may have purchased some of the suppliers, but I think most of the Tesla suppliers. So if Tesla has its own unique suppliers that only supply it, they may not be here at the business here. So I'm saying if Tesla has purchased companies down the supply line, and those are dedicated suppliers only to Tesla, where the only thing that their company does is supply Tesla, they may not come to this conference because there's no benefit. They don't want to share their technology, and they're not selling it because the only thing they do is supply Tesla. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there's many employees of Tesla that are here at the conference or coming to the conference to learn something, but they might not be advertising their company because they don't have anything for sale, and they're only selling parts to Tesla, and you might not want other people figuring out how how and what they're doing. Although, so I'm not sure. I didn't look into that. If someone in the chat knows Tesla's practice, and they might. I think Elon Musk bought a battery company or looked into the batteries, so he might have his own dedicated company that just makes the batteries for Tesla. And as I said, I don't think they're here. But a lot of these companies, it's the supply chain and of global supply chain, and if they're a big battery maker, they want to make batteries for all the companies, because you make more money the more you sell. And if not just General Motors is your customer, but Chrysler and Mercedes and the Japanese company Honda and Mitsubishi, they're going to make more money. And also the economy of scale. That if you have a large facility that manufactures batteries, it's probably easier to reconfigure it to the specific needs of specific cars than to have a competitor come. And then it's also there'll be cases like Tesla's a new company with a big budget and innovative technology where they will purchase downstream companies of the supply chain, and they would actually make the components for their car themselves and not buy it from the open market. Like Ford at some point mentioned the River Rouge plant, everything was made under one roof. But generally that's not been the direction. It's distributed. The car companies don't like to own the suppliers. And if it's a good supplier like Bosch, they supply all the car companies, and economies of scale will be able to specify the part for the multiple companies. So I'm losing my breath here a little bit. Go for this. I'll probably go back to the far end and collect reading material. And bounce. So Beckhoff, the German company, Nietzsche. Here you get some of the PLC controls company for people that want to design facilities. I like the PLCs, like Siemens and Johnson Controls, Allen Bradley. You also have power distribution. Generators, cabinets for batteries, storage facility, a lot of testing equipment. Like batteries. You had companies that do the ISO training or certification, and batteries, quite a high percentage of them need to be tested. So you have large machineries, cabinets that will test batteries, and the larger batteries, all of them need to be tested. My mom was asking yesterday about the chip shortage, also related to batteries. So, the bigger, more expensive car batteries basically all have chips. So, because they're, the direction of the Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, is that all basic parts of the car are monitored and recorded, and you have like AI analytics. But that any component of the car has an embedded chip and sensors, like the Automotive Testing Expo coming up here in a few months. That have been streamed also for a few years. So any part of the car will have sensors and an embedded chip, and the embedded chip will feed into the computer and relay important information about the lifespan and usage. So for the battery, if it's a multiple cell battery, there could be various components of the battery that go, or distribution problems. Any of these things will be fed into, will be recorded by sensors, and then the sensor will feed that into a chip, and the chip will process the information and pass it along to the computer, or you'll be available monitoring. So with an automobile, the battery will have a chip that's connected to all the various sensors embedded in the main computer, and then that information can be passed along to the car company, and just for the owner itself, so the owner could monitor the health of the battery. If there is a problem with the battery and it could be repaired, they know exactly what the problem is. And then general information about the battery that will help for future reference in manufacturing. So that's in all. You have test cells, control, data acquisition. So it's like all batteries these days have chips, and the chips are connected to sensors and will feed that into the computer of the car. And like Tesla's, probably are fed into the central control center of Tesla that monitors it. And so your battery is the most expensive component of your car, and it's worth tens of thousands of dollars, and therefore you want it to be in the best of health. If there's certain things, a lot of the car could on its own, certain aspects of the car that can control how the battery is being run, that will give it a longer lifetime, and it will be automated, so that the car does it automatically, maintaining the battery's longest health device. And so those monitoring. So I said there's the ISO requirements. If you're a battery manufacturer, you have your International Standards Organization that will have the basic specifications. This is your battery. This is what it's supposed to do. This is how long it lasts on average. And in order to get the ISO certification, you have to inspect a certain percentage of your battery and the manufacturing process. So they have the equipment for that. They have the ISO training and testing companies here. And then also, once the battery is in place, the continuing monitoring and extension of the useful life of the battery through mechanized computer controls of operating the battery in the most efficient way. So all of these, you'll say there's over 750 vendors here, and all of those type companies are here. And mentioned also the computer analytics. So it's all ComSoil here, the multi-physics platform. They have a special battery module that if you wanted to design a new style of battery and test the physics, multi-physics property, the chemical properties, you could do that in a simulated physics platform before you actually build the battery, like 3D printing. But just the computer, the idea and the specifications, the likely physical properties, if you changed around certain aspects about the chemical properties or how you built the battery. And then you have the computer control systems. So say like you have the PLC, the actual logic circuits to run the automated equipment, but the factory equipment, the special computer software for monitoring it, and all these various things. So that's your main things that are here. Also just generic electrical monitoring equipment. A lot of these will feed in hundreds of various electroscope. Anyone took advanced physics in university, and the name slipping me, the electrical monitoring equipment. So they have those here too, but some of these are much more advanced and could feed in hundreds of various inputs, and a lot of bowing. So a lot of people from the Far East do a lot of bowing. Okay, So I'm going to walk down this aisle. I've been at it over 40 minutes. The other day, I couldn't get reception, so hopefully here, and anyone's watching live, they should update with HD, so it should be in 720 later. So I'm going to walk all the way back to the far end, and then I'm going to end the stream, and then I'm going to walk back to where my car is and go aisle by aisle and collect reading material. And here you see car battery. This looks like Arabic. Previous year Saudi Aramco was here, and for that company to look back. So real global conference, and it's packed about China, and China is felt. So there's a crunch in the supply chain, inflation, because really China is the biggest player here, and the South Korean companies that are dominating here. South Korea is a U.S. ally. They're largely Christian, but most of the South Korean companies actually, do their manufacturing in China. So, it's an interesting element here of the diplomacy. If you check previous years, where it was like 10-20% Chinese, and there'd just be people from China, engineers, sales force, manufacturing, walking everywhere. So these Korean companies. And even a lot of these companies, they still are making the parts in China. It's just the travel restriction or the diplomatic fallout, sanctions in Russia and various things that is felt. But still, with that, the conference is in full effect. It's completely booked. The conference is completely sold out. Hundreds of thousands of engineers from around the world getting trained, meeting together with other engineers all over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if there's over $1 billion in business, multiple billions of dollars in deals will be made at this conference, because there'll be multiple suppliers. Rich person, it's very difficult to enter the battery business. It's not really succeeding. So very few batteries are made in Michigan, and generally the electrification of cars goes along with automation and employment reduction. Ford has announced cutting thousands of jobs in Michigan. So there are some opportunities, but generally, this has been a big part of automation, a way of jobs. And so there's not going to be much mass employees. So I feel like the foam show may have been just as much or more important, but it wasn't as interesting. Because the foam, the main, for the environmental concerns that it limits the weight that is used in vehicles, which related to batteries. The batteries are important to the field, but the weight limiting by using foam as opposed to metal should serve just as much of a purpose in terms of gas mileage usage. So I'm at the far end of the conference here, and I'm going to end the stream, and I said I'm going to collect some reading material. So God bless, and take care. Thanks for tuning in.